University, and he sets a new pace on where we also need to be focusing, and that's called early intervention. He has a unit up in Boston that's just for adolescents, and that's why we asked him to come join us here tonight, because we need to be doing more work with younger people.
Thanks, Perry. It's wonderful to see so many familiar and old faces, parents who've had their kids up with us. I had originally wanted to also make a big speech, but I think I'll just tell stories, because I think it's what I do, and it's sometimes hard to shut me up. Marsha's been able to do it at her mindfulness retreats, where we sit there for 5 days in silence. My wife wants to know what the trick is. So I remember when I interviewed at Boston University, I wanted to be a psychiatrist, and I was interviewing with the head of the department, and he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do child and adolescent psychiatry. He said, well, why would you want to do that? And he said, well, because I think that early intervention will help future outcome. And he said, oh, that's wonderful, how idealistic, how naive. But don't you understand that problems or deep-seated problems have to do with unresolved conflict, and you have to live a long life before you can have unresolved conflict. And once you have that unresolved conflict, then you can deal with it later on. When somebody says it with an accent and with a bow tie, it sounds damn good. Well, anyway, I went into child psychiatry because that's my way. I'm pretty obstinate in that way. And I was thinking about, skills. So if a child can't use a fork, or if a child cannot read, or if a child cannot drive a car, we intervene as soon as we can in order to get them to do that. Now, using a fork and driving a car and reading isn't always necessary across all cultures. If you're living in the Amazon and you spearfish, driving a car is a useless skill. Maybe using a fork is a useless skill. But in our society, using a fork and driving a car and learning to read are important skills. And so the idea that a lot of the children learn these skills as infants, toddlers, as they go through adolescence, why does that happen? It happens because the brain is changing so rapidly at this time. Now the brain is constantly changing. So if you're over 50 and think you can't learn a language, you can. You can learn a language. But from 13 through 22 or 23, there's tremendous growth in the brain. And it's often a time when people can acquire new skills. There's growth and pruning, So it makes sense that if someone doesn't have a skill like using a fork or reading, is to do it in childhood and adolescence. Now, if somebody loses that skill, so you have an accident and you break your arm and you can't use the fork, what do? We rehabilitate their ability, right? So that they couldn't use they used the fork, they broke their arm, couldn't use the fork, they sent them to a rehab therapist, teach them to do that. Now, what happens if you never had that skill to start with? You cannot rehabilitate that which you did not have before. So let's talk about habilitation, not rehabilitation, habilitation. Learning something completely new. So for most of us, we have our ability to regulate our own emotions, to deal nicely with other people, to tolerate distress and all of that sort of thing. But for many of the kids who come to our unit with borderline personality disorder, they don't have that ability to start with. And so it's teaching a new skill. This is not their choice. They do not choose this. It's not that they choose to make other people's lives miserable, nor ours in our interactions with them. They don't have the capacity to do something different. And so we teach them something different. There was a very interesting study about Olympians, and it turns out that it takes about 10,000 hours for somebody to become an Olympic champion, practicing whatever it is, archery, rock throwing. If that was a sport, my kids would have 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours to get to a level of competence that they're world class. It was also interesting is some research on mindfulness that shows that people who have done 10,000 hours of mindfulness have these massive, massive left prefrontal cortices, and that when you look at where joy sits in the left prefrontal cortex. So you can scan someone being really happy, and there it is. So, so practicing something for 10,000 hours. Now, 10,000 hours is a damn lot of time. I mean, if you did something every day, solidly, for 2 hours a day, every day for a year, it'd take you 15 years to get to 10,000 hours. Better to start when you're young than when you're 60 or 70. But nevertheless, you know, carry on. When I told McLean that I really wanted to start a unit for borderline personality disorder, boy, it took 6 years to get them to even listen, and then another 2 years to get the unit open, because the idea of having a bunch of borderlines, as they said, on a single unit was mind-boggling. We'd have security living with us. We'd have, you know, beds to strap these kids in and everything. But a few things were missing in the understanding. One is that imagine that you, well, universally these kids say, you know, no one understands me. You know, no one can understand me. People don't think the way that I do, and all of that sort of thing. So imagine you're a zebra in the African plains, and you're living with a pride of lions. You know, that would be a hard life to live. You know, you're always worrying that someone's going to jump on your back and eat you. You eat grass, and they're all eating meat, and it's a, you know, complicated thing. So then you're going along with your pride of lions, and all of a sudden there's a herd of zebra. What joy! And so what happens is that often a lot of these kids come onto our unit, and they meet other kids who think the way that they do. I mean, who's going to want to, you know, tear the place apart when there's such validation, such understanding, such common ground? The other thing is that it's a time of learning. So a lot of them are at school or in college or something like that. And so we take them from their classroom setting and put them in our classroom and teach them these skills. So it's a time of neuronal growth. It's a time for learning these things and skills that make sense. And the other thing is this idea of a lot of talk therapy. Now, I don't know exactly what talk therapy is. I used to think that I knew what talk therapy was. But just sitting around talking about how horrible your mother is makes you damn good at thinking about how horrible your mother is. That's all it does. Because you repeat that pattern over and over and over again. If you have a bad golf swing and you repeat that bad golf swing, you get good at that bad golf swing. You repeat the same ideas without changing anything. I had 2 neighbors who wanted to run the Boston Marathon with me. One of them would sit there and we'd go there and we'd talk about it. All the talking in the world didn't get him out there. The other one went out running with me on Sunday mornings and he finished the Boston Marathon. So that doing something changes your behavior a lot more than thinking about it or talking about it. So it was a treatment that made sense. It was an active treatment. It was a treatment that said, you know, change something. And I remember we had a mom come in, and she was extremely angry at her daughter. She'd been very angry at her for 10 years and would, you know, sadly, unfortunately, use corporal punishment and hit her. And at a family meeting, I said, you know, I think that you ought to get into therapy. He says, I'm ahead of you, doc, there. I've been in therapy for my anger. I said, well, that's tremendous. How long have you been in therapy for? He said, the last 10 years. I really love my therapist. You're going to be kidding me, 10 years and you're still this angry? What are you doing differently? Well, we talk about it every day, you know. So this is about talking about doing something and then doing something different. So finally, the other thing is that we have on our unit, and I think it's really important, is to have a team of people who really understand the condition, who can have compassion for those who are suffering this way. Because I know that the way that the symptoms are described, the misery and the pain, that if I suffered that much, I think that suicide does make sense.